morning we are going to, I'm looking around to see if we have any little ones in here. We're not going to talk about anything super crazy or nothing, but we are going to talk about prostitutes and adulteresses and stuff like that. So I do want to let you know about that. So if you do want to have a moment where you just escort a child out, you can do that, but we're not going to get too crazy, okay? Sam, in the video announcement, had talked about the Christmas season. Now, some of y'all, when the hiring process was happening with me and Summer coming here, we were excited when it all happened, but here's something that I don't think you're aware of. I don't think that you're ready for the Christmas crazy that Summer and I are going to bring to the church. So I hope that that's okay, because if it was up to us, like, it would be decorated for Christmas today. We're just that crazy about it. This year, y'all think I'm joking, but after the Light the Night this coming Saturday, we're already talking about decorating our house for Christmas, because we know that we'll be out of town for a couple weekends in November, and it's just too much work not to enjoy your decorations more than just a couple weeks. So we're that crazy people. Now, we're not like the country song that says that, the redneck woman song where she leaves her Christmas lights on all year long. We're not that crazy, and if anybody does that, I'm not saying that you're crazy. It's just your preference. But we love Christmas. Now, there's one thing that some people get really crazy about during the holidays, and it's Lifetime Movie Network. How many of y'all know what I'm talking about, where the Christmas Lifetime Movie Network shows come on? And people get obsessed about them, and they're like, oh my gosh, I wonder what one's coming out this year, and they're just crazy about them. I'm married to one of those. And she is nuts about Lifetime Movie Network Christmas shows, Christmas movies, and I'm just like, she says it's only Christmas, as if that's to justify her addictions. But listen, if you've never seen one, I'm going to help you never see one, okay? Because I'm going to share with you what happens in 100% of all of them. And it's a spoiler alert, okay? So what happens is you have two individuals who are longing for love. And they meet each other in a very unrealistic way. And they're like, at first they don't like each other, and then they start flirting, and then, oh, I think I like them. And then some outside source comes in and shares some kind of something that drives a wedge between them, and they're like, I don't know if I like you anymore. And then there's this whole drama of like, oh, I hope they discover truth, because then they really love each other, and then it'd be wonderful. So then the movie goes on, and then truth is revealed, and they're like, oh, I do love you, and then they live happily ever after. Therefore, I've just told you what happens in all of them, so those of you that have never watched one, save yourself, okay? That's what they do. It's all of them. Some of them have cats involved. Some of them have Christmas trees involved. Some of them they're just crazy, right? They're cheesy. The only reason I watch them is because I love my wife. I don't find myself crying. Yeah. It's the cross that I bear. The thing that's frustrating about all these movies, though, in all seriousness, they try to capture this love story that they just can't do justice with. And that's not only just Lifetime Movie Network, it's just TV in general. We live in a love-deficient, uneducated world. We just have all these different ideas of what love is. And now, if we have a relationship with Christ, we understand it, and so on and so forth. So you're like, well, I'm not completely oblivious to love, and maybe not. But our world has a love deficiency. And they try to define love, and they try to capture what love is, and they don't do it justice. And really what it comes down to, I love the Scripture and how the Scripture reads it in the New Testament, that God has a bad case of so loves for His people. Do you understand that? He doesn't just love us. He so loves us. There's like some guts in that love. You know what I'm saying? It's not just, He so loves us, like, Jesus loves the little children. That's cute and whatnot, and it introduces us to the love of God. But He's got a love that's like, so loves. It's like grips you, right? That's the kind of love that we have from God. It's a so love kind of love. And I think one of the neatest, most clear capturings of that kind of love is a love from a child to, or parent to their child. Now, I love our children, and they're so different and so unique in their own ways and everything. But I remember when Hannah was born, and I didn't know that avenue to understand love even existed until I held this child in my hands, and I was like, oh, dear Lord, I'm taking this home in a few days with no instructions, no nothing, but all I know is that I love this child. And it's just an overwhelming love. And if we could get somewhere real quick with our minds, that love kind of sheds light on the love that God has for us. And it's a kind of love that Lifetime Movie Network will never be able to accomplish. And it's a type of love that Hollywood will never be able to grab a hold of. This morning, we are going to read one of the most amazing stories. So we associate the greatest demonstration of the love of God as God sending His Son to die on the cross for us. That's the paramount. There's no greater love than that. We're going to look at the story that's second to that one, and it's from the life of Hosea. So go ahead and start turning to Hosea. Now, it's a hard book to find because it's a little bit smaller. It's in the list of the prophets. So if you can find Daniel, it's the next book right after Daniel. If you're in the New Testament, then you've gone too far. Before we start reading out of Hosea, I want to, if I could be your visual for a timeline, most of the time it's like this needle. I'm just going to be a really girthy needle moving through time, okay? So just use your imaginations. We talked about, we started in the garden, right? Several weeks ago. We started in the garden and looked at God's relationship between He and man. Now, we've talked about Moses and Noah and all. I'm not listing them in any particular order. I know that Moses came after Noah. Anyways. Then we talked about David and Solomon. Last week we talked about Solomon. The interesting thing that happened with David is because of his disobedience, because of his actions, God says, you know what, I love you and my covenant is always going to be with you, but after you die, the 12 tribes, there's going to be a divide. What's interesting about the divide that happens is when the children of Israel were getting ready to come into the promised land, there were spies that were sent out. Now catch this. The spies of the tribes come back and give a report of the land. They're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. We have to use 2 people to carry the grapes because the grapes are so crazy big. But there are Philistines there, and we look like grasshoppers in their sight. They're just huge men. 10 of the 12 had that kind of report. 2 of them reported the same stuff except for, let's go get the land. They were men of faith. And so what happens is, this is really interesting, when Solomon comes into being the king, there's a divide in that group, in those 12 tribes. 10 of those go to the northern kingdom, which were all the 10 who were naysayers about going into the promised land. Really interesting. And then you have the southern kingdom, which was 2 tribes, and it was the 2 men that had the positive, let's go kick some tail and go into the land that God has told us to go get. 100% of the kings in the northern kingdom did evil in the sight of the Lord. There were still some that did evil in the sight of the Lord in the southern kingdom, but it was balanced out a little bit because there were always kings who would come back to the Lord and do what was right in the sight of the Lord. Now, it's important to understand this. There's a divide in the kingdom. All of this drama is happening. In Hosea's life, he has watched 6 different kings divided between the northern and southern kingdom. He's watched them come and go. So he's seen some drama played out among the tribes of Israel, among the northern and southern kingdom. And he is a prophet during this time. Now, prophets, they were known in the area. They were They were reputable. They were important figures. When they spoke, people listened. And so here you have all this drama going on between kings disobeying God. You have some kings that are figuring it out, but then some that really don't. And what Hosea does is he's a mouthpiece to show people the love that God has for them. And what's amazing is that even since the garden, you've been seeing this, there's this common thread being woven through the tapestry of history, which is God's love being seen in all these different stories and these different scenarios. Now watch this. God shows up to Hosea, and it says that when God began to speak to him, these are the things that he said. Now, let me list off the kings. Let us get set. We're set up now with where Hosea is, with everything that's going on throughout history. Here we are. The word of the Lord that came to Hosea, son of Beri, during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, and those were the kings of Judah, and during the reign of Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, king of Israel. So I'm just going to forewarn you, there's a lot of wonderful names today, and I'm going to do my best to pronounce them. So just give me some grace. There's a lot of strange names. When the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, "Go, take to yourself an adulterous wife and children of unfaithfulness, because the land is guilty of the vilest adultery in departing from the Lord." So he married Gomer. What a bummer of a name. Gomer. But it makes sense because watch who her parents were. Married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. Now, before we get into the guts of this story, he's a prophet, a man of reputation, a man who walks before the Lord, who is the mouthpiece of God, who walks in purity. He strives not to be defiled. And he is a popular figure in history in this time. And God shows up to him and he says, "I want you to marry a prostitute. I want you to marry a prostitute because the land, the people of the land, they're guilty of the vilest adultery in departing from the Lord." In other words, let's take a trip through history, just like 10 seconds. Creation, drama, and separation from God. God's covenant with people. Promised land, they come out of Egypt into the promised land. God provides for their every need when it doesn't make sense for their needs to be provided. I mean, water from rock, okay? Quail from nowhere. Manna from heaven. Like, God did those things. And they still walk through this life as if these other gods help make these things happen. So they turned their sights, they turned their affection, they turned their trust to other gods. And so to show these people what love is, God has Hosea marry a prostitute. She conceived and bore him a son. Then the Lord said to Hosea, "Call him Jezreel." And that name means God scatters. "Because I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the massacre at Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of Israel. In that day I will break Israel's bow in the valley of Jezreel." And so this is a prediction, this is a prophesying of the fact that the northern kingdom is about to come to an end. And the name Jezreel means God scatters. So imagine this. In the same way that I call my children and I say, "Hey, Hannah, Aubrey, dinner's ready," and I'm saying the Lord is God's favor and the Lord's strength when I call my children. That's what I inadvertently or not, I'm declaring that. Hosea, can you imagine every mealtime, Jezreel, declaring God scatters. And he's prophesying what's going to happen to the children of Israel. Sidebar, that's why I get frustrated when parents don't take names seriously, because it's like, what are you calling your children and what are you proclaiming? It's a serious thing. Gomer conceived again and gave birth to a daughter. What's interesting from this point on, so they have the boy together. The next 2 children that they have are from other men. Gomer conceived again and gave birth to a daughter. Then the Lord said to Hosea, call her Lo-Ruhamah, for I will no longer show love to the house of Israel, so that I should at all forgive them. Yet I will show love to the house of Judah, and I will save them, not by bow or sword or battle or by horses or horsemen, but by the Lord their God. Israel is being done away with, but I'm going to show my faithfulness to Judah. And so these are weird names, and if you know how to say them better, kudos. But for now, Lo-Ruhamah means the Lord does not pity. He has no pity on them. He has no care or concern for them. That's what's being declared every time he calls out his daughter's name. After she had weaned Lo-Ruhamah, Gomer had another son. And the Lord said, call him Lo-Ammi, for you are not my people, and I am not your God. Can you fathom this? And not to mention the awkwardness of relationship between Hosea and Gomer. Gomer from a very different background and upbringing than Hosea, I would imagine, I would presume. For her to be where she is and for him to find a prostitute to marry. Very different upbringings, very different backgrounds between them. And so she is married to the man of God. And everything that he does, he has to appear to her over-committed to this God that he serves. Because from her standpoint, she sees him trying to listen to God as they're naming their children. God scatters. Thanks, that's a great name for our child. The Lord does not pity. So that's a great thing to proclaim over our own child, even though it wasn't their own child. And then the third one where it says, not my people. Not my people, and I'm not your God. These are the things that are being declared as they're calling out their children's names. Now, somewhere along the way, we don't have the full details of all of this, but somewhere in their life together, she runs. Gomer runs. She runs back to her former way of living. She runs to the folks. I would imagine that she had some regulars. She goes back to these men, to these people that were her business. And in chapter 2 of Hosea, there's this letter that's written where Hosea is even saying to his children, hey, let's barricade her in, let's block her in, let's block the pathways, let's put thistles and thorn bushes in her way so that she can't go out. Let's keep her here. And that works for a little while, but eventually she goes and she runs after the lifestyle that she was living. And this is such a crazy, crazy story. As if the embarrassment on Hosea's part couldn't be any worse. He's now without his wife because she's going back to her former way of living. And we pick up in Hosea chapter 3. And this is after she had left, and this is after she had been gone for a little bit of time. The Lord said to me, this is Hosea writing, the Lord said to me, go, show your love to your wife again, though she is loved by another and is an adulteress. Love her as the Lord loves the Israelites, though they turn to other gods and love the sacred raisin cakes. I'm not making this up. Raisin cakes? Israelites really? Raisin cakes? I would understand if it said they turn to other gods and for their love of snoogles. But we're talking about a raisin cake. What's that all about? That's in the Bible. It's not made up. They literally had a love for raisin cakes. What's interesting, and I was like, God, there's got to be something here. Like, God, you said this to Hosea. Go and show your love to your wife again as a way of showing my love for the Israelites. And even though, where he says, I love them, even though they have turned to other gods and they love raisin cakes. I was like, God, what does that mean? Seriously, did they just really have a hankering for some raisin cakes? I mean, there's other things in my life that I would be like, I got a hankering for. You know what I'm saying? But raisin cake is not at the top of that list. I don't find myself waking up in the middle of the night and be like, raisin cake! Gotta have one! Where I'm tearing apart the cupboard and trying to find the ingredients to make a raisin cake. You get my point. This isn't something that we crave today. Some of the theologians, as they look into this, there's a group of them that say, well, raisin cakes, this was something that was offered to Baal as a way of saying, thank you for the harvest. And I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. That registers. They're giving thanks to a false god, where it should be thankfulness to the living God. They're giving thanks to a false god. That kind of makes sense. But there's got to be something deeper than this, especially in the context of the story we're reading about the man of God marrying a prostitute. Where does it bridge? Where's the connect? A group of other theologians, they dig a little bit deeper and they recognize and they see that these raisin cakes were a form of aphrodisiac it was the female counterpart to Baal. And she was the god of fertility. And so if we can think just for a minute, I don't want us to venture too far because we don't tend to do this, but they had so many temples to so many other gods. They had temple prostitutes in many of the temples. So you can only fathom what took place in some of these temples if they had temple prostitutes. And so this fertility god, they would offer raisin cakes. No wonder why they had a drive for raisin cakes. Do you see how twisted they had become? This is how dark their path had come because they're worshiping a very sexual false god. That's what I really believe that's where God goes right to the guts of the children of Israel. He doesn't say, "Hey, you're not following me. Let's speak politely and nicely here. You guys just come on back." No, your love for raisin cakes, the sick, twisted view that you have of this false god, this fertility god. You're giving your affections, you're giving your loyalty, you're giving your trust, you're giving yourself to this false god. And that's why God tells Hosea, go show your love to your wife. Are you serious right now? God, I'm a man of God, but I can't. Seriously. You want me to go show my love to someone who's abandoning me and who's going after and sleeping around with other men? You want me to, seriously? Yeah, I do. Because you are going to model to the children of Israel my love for you, or my love for them. Let's just be practical here for a second. Can you imagine what that would have been like for the man of God to go to the parts of town that the men of God don't go to? There's a district in the town that men of God just don't go because they stay away from it on purpose. And he shows up. And I'm sure he had some interactions with people. This isn't just this nice decorated or orderly section of verses on a page. Like, this stuff really happened. He really went into the parts of town that you shouldn't go into, and people are probably like, and they know him. What are you doing here, Hosea? I'm looking for my wife. Have you seen my wife? No, man, I haven't seen her. I haven't seen her at all. I didn't know that she was gone. You might check down a few more blocks. She might be down that way. I wonder if he talked to some men that were her regulars. Have you seen, I know some things have gone on in the past with you guys, but have you seen my wife? I'm looking for my wife. I mean, I was with her a couple days ago, but I thought you guys, I just assumed that since she's here that you guys were apart and like you weren't together. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. That's whatever. I just want to know, have you seen her? No, it's been a couple days. And he shows up. You get the idea that he finds her in the moment where she's being sold into slavery. Sex slave, sex traffic, human trafficking. Because it goes on to say this in verse 2. And he's saying this about his wife, y'all. So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and about a homer and a lethek of barley. You bought your wife? Hosea, she's already yours. What do you mean you bought she already belongs to you. Why did you don't need to buy her? No, I'll buy my wife back. And there's significance between the silver and the barley. The silver is grace, and the barley, when you break it down, is a version or a variation of humanity, because it's the most common grain of that day. It was like the most basic. And so it's related to humanity. So you have the grace and you have humanity, and the gospel message is right there in the thick of everything that we're reading. Do we need to be reminded that we were bought for a price, even though we already belong to God? Because of our stubbornness, because of our wanting other things, we've been purchased by the blood of Christ. In the same way that Hosea, he purchases his wife, who is already his possession, who already belongs to him. And he goes on, he says this, after he purchases her, you are to live with me many days. You must not be a prostitute or be intimate with any man, and I will live with you. For the Israelites will live many days without a king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred stones, without ephod or idol. Afterwards, the Israelites will return and seek the Lord their God and David their king. They will come trembling to the Lord and to His blessing in the last days. And this whole thing, he's saying this stuff, and he's doing the best that he can with what he knows. And so it's not even about King David, it's about Jesus coming and saying, listen, there's going to be some days. Stop being unfaithful to God. Just sit tight, because in a little bit of time, Jesus is coming, and He's going to purchase you. See, the crazy thing is, we are all Gomers. He purchased us when we were already His. And what happens is when we register in our heads that we are Gomers and we understand what He has done for us, that He through His blood, He covered our sins and He purchased us. We belong to Him. We also understand that there are other Gomers. And this should shape our life. It should shape our life. Two questions today. Very simple questions. We'll take care of this one first. We live in a world, for whatever reason, they feel like they can give an opinion as to who God is. There's no opinion. He is who He says He is. Jesus has done what he has done. There's not up for interpretation. It's not just this philosophical, maybe it's just some kind of representation. No, literally Jesus became man, and he lived here on this earth, and he died on the cross for us. His blood covers our sin. Like that happens. That happened for us. And for whatever reason, we think that we can just share our wealth of wisdom of what we think happened and whatnot. No, he loves us. Let's step aside from ourselves and take a look into reality, true reality here. We have a God that's obsessed with us. He can't help it. Because he's got a case of the so loves. It's not just a part of who he is, it's his very nature. It's not just some kind of attribute or not just some kind of thing about him, it's him. The Scripture says that he is love. So he can't help but pursue us and strive after us. There's some scriptures that spell this out so well. In 1 John 4, verses 7 through 10, we read this last week in the Love Does home groups. My beloved friends, let us continue to love each other since love comes from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and experiences a relationship with God. The person who refuses to love doesn't know the first thing about God because God is love. So you can't know him if you don't love. This is how God showed us his love for us. God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. This is the kind of love we're talking about. Not that we once upon a time loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as a sacrifice to clear away our sins and the damage that they've done to our relationship with God. In Romans chapter 5, this is in the Message translation, Christ arrives right on time. He didn't and doesn't wait for us to get ready. He presented himself for the sacrificial death when we were far too weak and rebellious to do anything to get ourselves ready. And even if we hadn't been so weak, we wouldn't have known what to do anyways. We can understand someone dying for a person worth dying for, and we can understand how someone good and noble could inspire us to selfless sacrifice. But God put his love on the line for us by offering his Son in sacrificial death while we were no use whatever to him. While we were still sinners, he died for us. And what the story is saying is, while we were prostituting ourselves off to other stuff that have nothing to do with God, God in his love was pursuing us. Man, we're all Gomers, y'all. We're all Gomers where God is madly in love with us. And once we've had a taste of his love, we should be that obsessive about other Gomers encountering the living God.